everybody. Thank you all so much for joining our webinar this morning. We've got a lot of information to cover with you today, so I'm going to jump right in by introducing our wonderful partner and speaker, Dr. Gail Angus. She is one of the leading experts in integrated threat assessments and MTSS implementation in California. And when you hear her background and all the work that she's done on this topic, you'll probably get a better sense of why we've asked her to present to all of us today. Dr. Gail Angus pioneered the implementation of PBIS across California, working directly with thought leaders Rob Horner, Jeff Sprague, and George Sugi to bring evidence-based practices to schools statewide. Over 2 decades, she has guided hundreds of districts across California and the nation to successfully implement integrated MTSS frameworks, creating equitable learning environments where students and staff feel both safe and included. Dr. Gail Angus blends her doctoral research on PBIS implementation and school violence with 30 plus years in education, 8 years in the classroom as a credentialed general and special education teacher director at the Riverside County SELPA, and more than a decade as a national consultant. She has taken the knowledge she has gained as a teacher, working with students who struggle with extreme behavior issues, combined it with the skills she developed implementing large-scale initiatives at both county and state levels, and distilled it into the practical framework that drives systemic change. Throughout her learning, she identified the barriers to implementation and shares this knowledge with educators through her framework and weekly podcast, System Shift, Leading Change to Student Thrive. Her focus is on helping districts move from theory to action, from aspiration to sustainable integration. Driven by her commitment to safety and inclusion, Dr. Gail Angus created a proprietary bridge framework, building responsive, integrated district governance for excellence, a comprehensive system that integrates leadership strategies with MTSS, PBIS, SEL, restorative practices, UDL, and threat assessment. The bridge framework ultimately melds school-based best practices with recommendations from the National Threat Center, FBI, and Secret Service. Her proprietary frameworks and assessment tools support districts not just with implementation, but with building resilient systems that will withstand leadership transitions and budget cuts, and more critically, enable rapid crisis response while providing targeted interventions for students, staff, and broader school community. In recent engagement, Dr. Gail Angus supported a district who serves approximately 42,000 students, implementing MTSS across all campuses. Results were substantial. By year 2, the district cut suspensions in half, increased attendance rates, elevated the sense of safety across all campuses, and saw academic scores rise across the board, demonstrating the direct connection between systems-level behavioral support and student achievement. Preventing school violence drives every aspect of Dr. Gail Angus's work. It is my honor to introduce Dr. Gail Angus and transition over to her. Gail, it is all yours.
Thank you, Eric, and welcome everyone. I'm so glad you're here today. And during our time together, we're going to explore something I'm deeply passionate about, a framework that can fundamentally shift how you address attendance, behavior, discipline in your schools and district. But here's what makes this different. We're not talking about adding more programs or initiatives to your already full plates. Instead, we're going to focus on the systems that create sustainability, integration, and most importantly, give you the peace of mind knowing your students and staff are genuinely supported. Before we dive into the framework itself, I want you to shift your lens and mindset today. I'm inviting you to think like a scientist. What does that mean? It means approach this time with genuine curiosity and openness. Scientists don't look for data that confirms what they already believe. They actively seek evidence that challenges their assumptions. They experiment, they observe, and they're willing to be proven wrong. So here's my challenge for you. As you move through this session, I want you to examine your current system with fresh eyes. Look honestly at the possibilities or limitations embedded within. Ask yourself, what mindset, both yours and your staff, are driving your current practices? What beliefs are shaping how you respond to student behavior and attendance? And what strategies are you using now? And more importantly, why are you using them? Be curious about the new ideas that emerge today and think openly about the possibilities and implications these ideas might create. And most importantly, explore your current system. This scientific mindset will help you see where you're already strong and where there's room to grow. And it will help you identify whether your current systems can actually sustain leadership change, budget cuts, and community pressures. Are you ready to be scientists? So, what exactly are we doing today? We're exploring a framework you can use to address the issues that keep you up at night: attendance challenges, behavior concerns, and discipline. But this isn't just about students. This framework also addresses something equally critical: staff stress and sustainability. Because when staff are overwhelmed, when they don't feel supported, and when they're operating in crisis mode every single day, that affects everyone. Let's be honest about what many of you are facing right now. This framework was created in response to what I've been hearing from districts everywhere. Every system is feeling stressed and overwhelmed. The pressures come from multiple directions: chronic absenteeism, intense behavior issues that staff weren't trained to handle, upset, concerned staff members who feel unsupported, exhausted caregivers, and community members who are demanding solutions. The framework I'm going to share with you will help you move from feeling like you're in a chaotic or unpredictable environment to having a sense of peace of mind and control. Over the past 15 years, I've developed a framework to support the work I've been doing with hundreds of school districts across California and beyond, with developing sustainable systems to address students' social, emotional, and behavioral needs. The core components: proactive, preventative, responsive, and immediate response, they form the foundation. But here's the truth. Over the years, I've watched many districts implement these components successfully, only to see them plateau or fade away over time, because implementation alone isn't enough. Let me tell you what I've learned about why good programs fail. I know this might sound counterintuitive, but here it is. It's not about changing student behaviors and outcomes first. It's about focusing on adult mindset and actions. Think about it. The students who need these changes are already showing up at your schools. They need adults who are ready, willing, and skilled to support them right now. But instead, we often spend years piloting programs or waiting for the perfect rollout before bringing it to staff. And meanwhile, students continue to struggle and staff feel overwhelmed. If you're multitasking, come back to me. This is important. It comes down to this. Shift happens when you focus on supporting collective efficacy among your staff, when there is an honest belief they can make a difference, and when they feel genuinely connected to the purpose and their voices included in building the system. This requires slowing down initially to train all staff thoroughly and giving them the knowledge and skills to do the work and be genuine partners in building the system. They are the ones who will make a difference in the system. They are the ones who move the work away from just being a checklist or surface level initiative. When staff are invested and have the necessary skills and support, they'll do the heavy lifting. Now let's get into the framework itself. The first component is proactive. And this is all about creating foundations you want to create. You want to create that safe, predictable environment. And I want to be clear about what this means. This isn't about students following rules perfectly or never making a mistake. Safe and predictable means that expected behaviors are clearly defined and demonstrated by students and staff, and that these expectations are taught and mastered by everyone. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. All classified staff, teachers, administration, and support staff. Think about it. Would you expect a math student to master algebraic equations without explicit teaching and practice? Of course not. So why would you expect students or staff to demonstrate complex social and emotional behaviors without the same level of intentional instruction? And this is where consistency with the integration and teaching of social skills, along with the mastery by both staff and students, becomes critical. You need consistent teaching delivered by staff who truly understand why these skills matter and how to teach them effectively. And this requires ongoing professional development, not just that one-time training at the beginning of the year, but continuous support and skill building throughout. And when you get this right, something powerful happens. Your environment becomes predictable, not because it's rigid, but because everyone understands and is following the same expectations and have the skills to meet them. The proactive component also includes two other critical pieces: developing connection and belonging, and using evidence-based instruction and intervention. Connection and belonging aren't soft skills. They're essential protective factors that both students and staff need. And when students feel genuinely connected to the school and their peers, along with having at least one caring, trusting relationship with an adult on campus, student behavior improves, their attendance increases, and their academic outcomes strengthen. And when staff feel belonging, connection, support, staff engagement improves and satisfaction increases. The research on this is overwhelming. But here's the thing: connection cannot be forced or manufactured. It has to be built through authentic relationship and consistent positive interactions. To build this, one Southern California district made an intentional decision to have all admin and staff present daily to greet students as they arrive and left campus. This one change made powerful impact. It provided students and staff the opportunity to get to know each other, behavior issues decreased, and a sense of safety increased. And finally, you have to ensure what you're teaching and how you're intervening is actually based on evidence, not just what's popular or what the latest vendor is selling, but what research tells us actually works. This is where your scientist mindset from earlier comes in. You need to be rigorous about evaluating whether your practices are truly effective. Okay, scientists, which area is your system strong in, and which do you have concerns with? Make sure to note this so you can follow up. On to the second component, which is preventative. And this is where you get ahead of problems before they escalate. And this means teaching and recognizing warning signs. Help both staff and students identify early indicators that someone is struggling. Maybe it's a student whose attendance is starting to slip, or whose engagement in class is dropping, or who's having more frequent conflicts with peers. And when staff are trained to notice these patterns early, they can intervene before a small issue becomes a crisis. Being like a scientist, you need to consistently monitor your systems and outcomes using continuous improvement structures. This isn't about drowning in data. It's about having simple, sustainable ways to track whether your efforts are working. This means having meeting structures and protocols to regularly review your data, gather feedback from staff and students, and make adjustments as needed. Do teachers meet to discuss how new instructional strategy is working? Is the leadership team meeting to review how the weekly community circle is impacting attendance rate or behavior referrals? Systems at work are living systems. They evolve and adapt based on what you're learning. And the third component is responsive. And this is about having structures in place to address needs as they arrive. And early identification is key here. You need systems that help you quickly identify when a student, a teacher, or a school site is struggling, whether it's academically, behaviorally, or with attendance. The earlier you catch it, the less intensive the intervention needs to be. To do this, you need a tiered response system. Not everyone needs the same level of support. Some will thrive with universal supports and interventions, while others need more targeted or intensive interventions. The system needs to be flexible enough to provide the right level of support to meet the need. And you absolutely must include progress monitoring. Once you put an intervention in place, you need to know whether it's working. Is students' behavior improving? Is your attendance increasing? If not, you need to adjust approach quickly rather than waiting weeks or months to see if things get better. A few years ago, I guided a district with developing a system to monitor data to identify school sites in need of support. They created a process to determine the need and the level of tiered intervention, coaching, and support required. And the need, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. They now were able to respond and provide admin and staff with the needed support and positively impact student outcomes, as well as reassure the board that leaders are getting in front of issues before they get out of control. Does a system like this resonate with you? And the fourth component is immediate response. And this is your crisis management system. When something serious happens, a significant behavior incident, a mental health crisis, a safety concern, you need to be able to respond immediately and effectively. This starts with a notification system. How do students, staff, families, and the community share about threats? I was working with a small district when a superintendent shared that they don't need a fancy notification system, that families can just email or text him with a concern. Of course, I got curious and wanted to know how this was working. Is it easily accessible to all, like students and the community? Is it anonymous? Is it monitored 24/7? Like, what happens when you're in a meeting or sick or on vacation? And when this happens, who is the information communicated to the people who need to know? And are you always able to communicate with the right people quickly? Bottom line, you need a system that's 24/7, easily accessible by everyone with anonymous reporting capabilities that have clear protocols that everyone understands and can activate without hesitation. You also need an assessment process. When a crisis occurs, you need to quickly assess the situation and determine the level of risk and decide on appropriate response. This can't be ad hoc. You need clear procedures and forms to guide decision making. And you also need community interaction protocols. Many crises will require coordination with families, mental health providers, law enforcement, and other community partners. Having established relationships and clear communication channels before the crisis occurs makes an enormous difference in how effectively you can respond. And finally, when a student returns to school, there needs to be a process to place them back into the tiered response system to receive the appropriate interventions and progress monitoring. Are you wanting all four components to function well in your district? Now I know what some of you might be thinking. This sounds great, Gail, but we already have so much on our plates. How do we actually do this? The framework I've shared isn't meant to be something entirely new that you add on top of everything else. Instead, it's a lens for looking at what you're already doing and identifying where the gaps might be, especially with critical leadership components that are often neglected in program implementation. Things like mindset, purpose, alignment of systems, collective efficacy, and communication. These are the elements that transform implementation into true integration. So let's put the BRIDGE framework together. BRIDGE is an acronym that stands for Building Responsive Integrated District Governance for Excellence. The BRIDGE framework brings together the key elements you need to have in place for sustainable, integrated systems. This is your practical roadmap that helps you to move from theory to action, from implementation to integration, and in a way that's manageable and sustainable. And if you're multitasking, come back to me, because one of the most powerful things you can do as a scientist right now is conduct an honest audit of your current system. I've created a system support audit tool that you can download using the QR code in this slide. This audit walks you through each of the 4 core components: proactive, preventative, responsive, and immediate response, and helps you identify where you're strong and where you have opportunities for growth. This isn't about judgment. It's about getting a clear picture of your current reality. So, like a scientist, you can make informed decisions about where to focus your energy and resources. I encourage you to use this tool with your leadership team, and even consider having different stakeholder groups complete it separately to see where perceptions might be different. Sometimes what leadership thinks is happening and what staff and students experience can be quite different. And if your organization needs an external partner to provide a more comprehensive, in-depth look at their systems, there's the Align audit. Use this QR code to fill out the request form. The Align audit is a comprehensive review that evaluates how your district's behavioral health system integrates and aligns across all levels. It takes a whole system view, examining not just student safety and engagement and attendance, but also staff support and retention. What makes this audit particularly valuable is that it provides an action-oriented insight. You don't just get a report telling you what's wrong. You get a personalized, proactive recommendations aligned with your district's unique context and goals, which you can use to make immediate impact. One district was able to respond to the board's request for safer schools by taking the recommendations and creating a 3-year plan. Look, I know this work is challenging, and you're dealing with complex issues, limited resources, and high stakes. You don't have to do it alone. If you want support, whether it's conducting an audit, developing professional learning for your staff, or getting coaching with implementing these systems, I'd love to connect with you. Use this QR code to obtain more information on how we can work together. I genuinely mean it when I say this work is my passion. I am committed to supporting districts who are ready to make meaningful, sustainable change. Before we move to questions, I want to leave you with one final thought. Here's a quote from Bonnie Chu's book on muscle that defines this work. The way you build muscle is by breaking yourself down. Muscle fibers sustain damage through strain and stress, and then repairs themselves by activating special stem cells that fuse to the fiber to increase size and mass. You get stronger by surviving these series of little breakdowns, allowing for regeneration, rejuvenation, regrowth, building up, and breaking down. We exist in this constant cycle. In fact, it's the cycle that allows us to exist. And when it ceases, so do we. I love this metaphor because it captures something essential about system change. Shifting systems takes strength and endurance. And just like building muscles, it requires breaking down old patterns, allowing for regeneration, and growing something stronger. The key is building systems that can survive those moments of breakdown, that can regenerate and grow stronger because of them. That's what happens when you focus on adult mindset to build collective efficacy and structures that integrate rather than just implement it. It is these systems that will support you when staff are pushing back, when budgets are being cut, when leadership is changing, and when you're faced with the thousands of other challenges that feel like setbacks and moments where nothing is working. As I shared with one assistant soup who is facing a crisis, this is not failure. This is part of the process. But now you have systems to respond. There will always be constant cycles of building up and breaking down. In fact, it's the cycle that makes your system stronger, able to exist and thrive. When you try to avoid breakdown, when you resist the discomfort of change, that's when your system ceases to grow. So embrace the process. Trust that that strain you're feeling isn't a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you're building something stronger. So, as you do this work, let's stay connected. You can email me directly. I would love to hear how you're progressing. Join our email list. You'll get resources, tools, insights delivered to you weekly. Listen to our weekly podcast where we dive deep into these topics. Follow us on social media and stay connected with our System Shifter community. And of course, you can always visit our website for additional resources. Remember, you're not alone in this work. There's a whole community of system shifters, educators who are committed to creating sustainable, effective systems that support both students and staff. And I'd love for you to be part of that community.
And all right, Gail, thank you so much. We do have a handful of questions, so I'm hoping the folks stick around to kind of work through some of these kind of scenarios that you covered in your presentation, Gail. Of course, this wouldn't be a traditional webinar without the legal disclaimer, so I will put on my best auctioneer voice to go through the disclaimer before we go through this. Keenan is not an insurance brokerage. Keenan is an insurance brokerage and a consulting firm. It is not a law firm or an accounting firm. We do not give legal advice or tax advice, and neither this presentation, the answers provided during the question and answer period, nor the document accompanying this presentation constitutes or should be construed as legal or tax advice. You are advised to follow up with your own legal counsel and or tax advisor to discuss how this information affects you. I sure hope we're not going to talk about taxes, Gail. That's not my intent at all. So, I do have a handful of questions, and I'm going to kind of rewind back to the beginning of what you were talking about earlier on the webinar about, your students are showing up. They're there every day, and they need the adults to be there with an adult mindset. And you kind of talked about, the idea that because of that, like their students are there already. They're there. Don't wait to implement this till it's done. Like there's no sense of it being done. Can you kind of just deconstruct that a little bit more about like maybe taking bite-sized pieces with this and starting with even just one block, even if the rest of it is still being built?
Oh, that's a great question, Eric. And it was something very early on in my career and also in my research that I learned. I was one of the people that thought, well, wait, everything has to be perfect and put into place before we start bringing it forward. And what I learned was that as you're building and you put it out there, you start making impact and you start making change. And so that's what I'm talking about. So let's say that you're defining your expectations. You need to start putting that language out there, especially with staff, so that we're working through and we're all defining together versus, well, first we have to get it into a neat little package before we bring it out there. And to break it down even a little further, it's super important to have all stakeholders, all important voices as part of that development, instead of developing and then having to respond to, like, well, now what's the union going to say? Invite the union to be part of the conversation so they understand why we're even doing this.
That makes perfect sense. And that actually leads into the next question really well, where you talked about the importance of staff investment, right? And that it's not necessarily about pushing out forms and checklists. It's about building this process with all of those key stakeholders involved in the concept, which kind of implies the concept that there needs to be an opportunity for them to share. There needs to be an opportunity for them to provide input and provide suggestions that everyone can listen to, all of that coming into some of the topics that we've talked about a lot on psychological safety, right? Where as a leader, as an administrator in a district, to be intentional about creating those opportunities for staff to provide input, and that not that you're necessarily taking it all and implementing it all, but to somehow take that into the total program and the total process as you're doing that. Can you expand a little bit on how, like, where those elements fit into that framework that you've talked about today?
Okay. I think this is what you were asking. And if I don't respond completely to it, re-ask your question. So I have learned and I have been implementing with districts across the state of California as they're developing very early on. And when I say early on, at the very beginning stages, having the stakeholders be part of the conversations, be part of the development. Going back to psychological safety, when people can feel heard, feel part of it, they are more willing to support the implementation when we hit there, but also they can help identify the blind spots before it gets implemented. So I'll give you an example. The very first day when we were bringing forward with the district leadership team what we were building in a district, sitting in that room were union representation from both the certificated and classified and management. There was also all divisions across the district sitting there being represented. There were administration and teaching staff and classified staff from across all levels sitting there and being part of that. And we continue to utilize that type of process through everything that was being developed so that the voices were heard and we were addressing concerns. And like you said, Eric, not all the time do you implement everything that's there, but at least they felt that they were part of the building of it and that they could see why things might not have happened the way they intended. And this was super crucial around the when revamping like a discipline guide and having the union voice and teacher representation and classified representation being there to understand why, say, for example, you're moving more to an intervention-based process versus just the punishment part in the discipline guide. Did that respond to your question?
Yeah, absolutely, and that makes perfect sense. At, at one point in your material, you made a comment about one of the goals being to try to make your environment predictable. And it struck me as like, what a cool concept. And I'm wondering if you can expand on that a little bit about like, what does that mean? What does that look like from the student's perspective? If staff and leadership are creating an environment that's predictable, presumably from a behavior response perspective and the administration perspective, what does that really look like from the student's perspective, and how does that help support student safety?
Oh, great question. And this goes across elementary, middle school, and high school, but especially in secondary, where students are changing their environment about every 55 minutes. Um, Having that predictable environment, it's that no matter where I am on campus, I know what's expected of me. I have been taught what's expected of me. I have the skills to engage with that, but also the adults on campus are consistent with what's expected of me. So it's not like, well, if they're in Mr. Preston's class, this is what's expected of them. And then when they go to Gail's class, this is what's expected of them. And then when they go into the library, there's other expectations. Now, granted, you're going to have little nuances that might be different, but the overall expectation and the skills that are necessary to navigate it would look the same. Recently, a friend, it was actually during our podcast, gave a great example of this, and I'm going to remove it out of schools. And she put it into predictable environments as we navigate an airport and getting on a plane, right? It doesn't matter if you fly United, Southwest, American, JetBlue, whatever it is. There are certain behaviors in an airport and getting on the plane that we all know. You walk in a single file, you look for your seat if it's assigned, or if you fly Southwest, the first available one that you feel comfortable sitting in. You put your baggage, the bigger bags up overhead, you put your smaller things in the seat in front of you, you put on your seatbelt, you don't play your music loud, right? You don't act obnoxious on the plane. You listen to the flight attendants. When the plane lands, you wait till you get to the jetway, et cetera, et cetera. There's predictable environments. And when somebody doesn't do it, boy, does it stand out, right?
Yep. Yep. That makes perfect sense. And I will keep my color commentary to myself on that one. um, um, no, and that makes perfect sense. And again, like, yeah, from a student's perspective, the more that they can get used to what that should be, then it makes those undesirable behaviors stand out even more, to your point, right? And then presumably can get addressed much quicker from the staff's perspective also.
Right. And the more we teach them and the more that we as the adults are consistent and feel assured by them, fewer and fewer students are going to need some supports, but the ones that do, we don't feel overwhelmed.
That makes sense. I have a few more. So you mentioned later on in your presentation the idea of an intentional effort, and that they're kind of universal, site-wide intentional efforts embraced by all staff. And you gave a scenario or an example of one of the sites or one of the districts implementing a process or an effort where all staff were going to greet students in the morning. They were always going to be outside and greeting all the students in the morning. Can you dive into a little bit about like what led up to that idea? What were some of the conversations that were held before that idea was implemented, just to kind of help the attendees get a sense of what that process looks like to implement something where everybody does this, and like, kind of those thoughts that go into that decision making process.
Oh, great idea or great question. So, some of the pieces that went into that was the research around protective factors to be trauma informed. They were looking at different ways for staff and students to make connection and engagement and for staff to get to know them. But more importantly, they were having some concerns around arrival and dismissal behaviors. And so they were looking at what is a strategy that they can get in front of some of the behaviors, but still create some of that connection and belonging and thinking outside the box. And so they knew that adult presence helps with behaviors, but then it also would give that opportunity to make engage, make connection. So one, they wanted to try to get in front of some of the behaviors with the adult presence. And they thought, wait, what a great opportunity. It's not just standing there and manning the gates. It's about checking in. And if you notice something, you can respond right then and there. Like, say, for example, I come in and I have a tear-stained face. Whoever is the adult, be it an admin, be it a counselor, be it a teacher, notices that Gail has a tear-stained face, they can, one, check, hey, how are you doing? Making sure I feel seen, heard as I'm walking in. But they also, to take note of that, and that if it's elementary and if there happens to be a counselor on the campus, they can go make note and have the counselor go check in. Or if there's not, as the admin, you can make it a point to just check in just to make sure everything's okay. So there was a lot of reasons and rationale. They really took a lot of pieces from research between the social emotional component of it and the behavior. And there were conversations about how can we meld this together. And there was a lot of conversations with the principals as well. So it was building up into it, right? And that's where that stakeholders coming together, the representation, and then rolling it out saying, hey, this is what we're going to do.
Okay. And I think you also kind of hit on a sub answer in there, is that at least for this case, the process started by the identification of a need, right? The identification of a goal they were trying to achieve that was very specific to them or at either that district or that school. And that was kind of the genesis of, okay, well, how do we address this one particular problem? At least not trying to just say we're trying to develop an entire system all at once, right? It's like, no, we have one challenge, we're going to address this one challenge, and then we're going to build that into this greater system like we talked about earlier.
Right. And it's not waiting for the perfect rollout.
Yep.
Okay. And they did. They put it into place. They tweaked it a little bit. They had to work out like, oh, wait, what happens when somebody's ill? Or if there's that, I call it school happens, right? And, something happens or in a meeting or you can't be there. What does that look like? And I've been on those campuses when principals were in meetings, and depending on the level of the meeting, they have said, you know what, can we take a break? I really need to be outside right now. This is important. So that was the other piece. Because they owned it, they made it important, and they were implementing it, and they got to see a change and the impact from it.
Very, very cool. Okay, two more. So this is a bit wordy, so I'll try to summarize it at the end. When you were talking about having systems in place to identify when both students and staff are showing signs of needing support of some kind. And we spent a lot of today talking about obviously the student side of the equation, but we're not excluding the staff side of the equation, right? As much as we have, that they're involved in the process of creating these and that we need them to be that adult mind for the student to see, we're all human, right? And at the end of the day, we're not always on our A game. And sometimes I'm going to show up and I'm just not going to be there 100% mentally. I might not even be there 80% mentally for whatever's going on in my world, right? So, can you elaborate on maybe what are some of those systems and responses you could have in place that are specific to when the staff side of the house is being a human and we're just not perfect robots every day? What are some of those solutions look like in those scenarios?
Oh, so, and this really depends on the supports available within a district. So I'm going to just put that
Sure.
caveat, but let's talk about Utopia District. It has everything. It's wonderful. I know it probably exists in Utopia, but it's looking at your current systems to see where you can also tap into to provide some support to staff as well. And I know that's very convoluted with what I said. So let me see if I can break that down a little bit. One, just like we want to take that lens of it's not all about a got you with students or punishment with students, it's about the same thing with our staff. When we're taking this lens, it's really about how do we support you to be the best educator you can be and that you could show up. And you're right. We don't know what has happened with our students, let alone in the adults that are walking on campus. And as much as all of us try to open up the trunk and throw whatever it is in the trunk that has happened outside of school, sometimes it does roll in with us. And so how can we look at our systems to provide that support? So for instance, there's one district that developed a wellness and engagement for students, like they just have therapists and counselors and behaviorists out of this department that deploy to the sites. But they also hired a counselor whose focus is providing support to staff. It's about working with HR around providing the EAP. I'm getting the acronyms wrong. If I did, I apologize. But if you need to make connections, but before an administrator can even get to that part, it's about, did you create a trusting relationship with your staff that they know that you truly want to support? I made the comment in my presentation that every student should feel like they have at least one trusting, caring relationship with an adult on campus. Staff should also feel like they have trusting relationships on campus, that if something is happening, I should be able to feel that I could walk on my campus, go to my administrator and say, hey, I just need you to know that my grandmother passed away last night, but I'm really trying to be here today for my students because it's testing or whatever, but I just need you to know this happened, and not feel like me sharing that was going to get me thought of as less or whatever. I don't know. That might not have been the best example I could give, but
No, that makes perfect sense. And again, I think your point is well received. That this is an entire population program, right? That we're not just focusing on the needs of the students, we're focusing on the needs of everyone on the campus, so that everyone else can benefit.
right, because if your adults aren't healthy, your students like
Right.
the impact that they make on the students. We all feed off of each other. So that's kind of that piece, right?
Yep, makes sense. All right, last question. I think it's pretty brief. At the very end, we were talking about the kind of the emergency response, right? When something does go bump and we need to do something to help kind of maintain safety and respond to whatever it is. You touched on this concept that you want procedures to guide decision making. And what came across to me was the goal isn't to provide the answers to everything in these guides, right? The goal is to prompt the right questions to allow the human, whoever that human adult is, to make the best informed decision they can make about that unique scenario. Um, and it's thought if you want to kind of expand on that a little bit about, like that, or maybe reaffirm that it's not about trying to tell your staff, here's what you do all the time. It's this, and this. It's about crafting the curiosity factor so that they can make that better informed decision since every situation is unique, right? Is that kind of what you're trying to get at there?
Yes. So it's taking the idea, or not taking the, that's, raise that. It's the idea that there's maybe a set of questions to guide. So maybe you have a set of questions if the concern is around suicide. So here's my set of questions to see, do they have a means to do it? Do they have a plan? Because that's different response. If it's a threat, here's the set of a violent threat. Here's the set of questions to guide you to determine, again, are they capable? What stage is it? What do I need to do to respond? Or if it's a behavior concern, say it's a fight that's happening on campus right then and there. Here's our steps of how do we get to stop that's safe, right? And is the staff that are going to stop the fight trained, all of those pieces? That's a procedural piece. But then as you're investigating what happened, what's not, or even better, because now many districts are having have notification systems and they're anonymous, students are letting staff know, hey, I heard that there might be a fight. And there's even that curiosity question. Okay, is this really going to happen? Where is it going to happen at? And how can we get in front of it? So you just need a set of questions and protocols to help guide you through these different pieces.
All right. Well, Gail, thank you so much for your time today. For all of you who participated on the webinar, thank you so much for listening and being here today. We did post the links to the various QR codes that Gail showed in case you weren't able to get your phone up real quick. The links are in the chat, so you're welcome to click on those there as well. Otherwise, I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and we'll be in touch.